Hello and welcome to another episode of Good for Profit. This is your host Mo, and we are bringing you a special release for the end of the year 2022 to celebrate Christmas and New Year's and enter the new year in style. We're bringing you around 10 conversations with mostly founders of tech for good startups, but also founders of businesses that are for profit and for good at the same time, as is the theme of the podcast. So without further ado, let's dive into one of these conversations. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Kirpal, pleasure to have you with us here today, my friend. Hello and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Like I said earlier, really appreciate the love and being able to speak to you today.
No, absolutely, man, absolutely. I mean, you're working on some pretty awesome stuff, so I really can't wait for us to tell our audience about it and chat about it. Learn more about the why behind everything and so on. So I do like to often actually start with that question, why? Because obviously you're in the quote unquote tech for good space in a way, right?
Yeah.
With Stay 60 and...
Yeah, so we have two, I suppose, brands and products live at the moment. So the first one is Stay 60, and I'll be honest, initially that started because I had a routine blood test where the nurse couldn't extract any blood from my veins because I was so dehydrated. Yeah. The weird thing is it happened to my father a couple of years before. So we're obviously a family that just wasn't drinking enough water. I don't know.
So that's the problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or I don't know if it's the salty Indian food that was doing it for us.
That could be it too. Yeah, that could be it too.
Just dehydrated.
But that's interesting. I never realized that dehydration has something to do with it. I thought maybe it's more genetic, or like the veins aren't easy to find or something like that.
Yeah, it's a thing where you just need to make sure you are hydrated for them to be able to find the veins and for the blood to actually flow. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I had to be kind of sent away to come back another day. But they said, drink more water. Make sure you're drinking more water. Like, this is really important. You shouldn't be that dehydrated at your age. So I started using single-use plastic bottles. Buying the standard Evians. And then it's like, clearly this is not good for the planet, and this is a single-use culture. Clearly this was about 5-6 years ago. So it's before the whole big kind of blue planet and the whole kind of big plastic pollution situation was a big thing, or was known about, should I say? And then I started looking for, I need some sort of reusable vessel. But I'll be honest, most 95% of them are off the shelf in China, so hence all of the bottles looking the same. The Coca-Cola shape, or like the different play of a little different cap. They're all different factories with the same tooling, doing exactly the same bottle. So it's like, I'm really fussy about the kind of brands that I align with, the accessories that I carry. It's not about labels or anything like that. It's just I like good design, and I just thought these are so utilitarian. They just don't look great. So then we decided to design our own essentially. Which is where Stay 60 came about, kind of just from that little kind of path and roadmap of, lack of dehydration,
Brilliant.
seeing a gap in the market and something that would fit.
As good a reason as ever to start something that promotes drinking more water, right?
Yeah, hence the name. Because we do get people questioning the name, and it's like, well...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what does that mean? Yeah.
Your body is 60% water.
Got it.
Yeah, we were more overtly kind of like obvious about it on our marketing, but we kind of pulled it back a little bit and concentrated on focusing on design and the sustainability elements. You can't kind of do everything at once, so otherwise it becomes a bit
Sure. That's really awesome. So you were dehydrated. I'm hoping that now you're hydrated. I'm hoping you're drinking enough water today.
I have enough reusable water bottles to make sure that I'm fully hydrated. So yeah, all fine.
That's good. Okay, awesome. That's good. So it's worked, right? That's the.
I want to carry around a water bottle all the time because it is a nice design, and it makes drinking easier because of the certain way that we've designed the cap, for example. So it means that I am drinking water because it's pleasurable to be drinking out of a vessel that is designed in a certain way.
Well, it is actually the next thing I was going to jump onto and ask you around that, because you obviously, when you drink water on a day-to-day basis, or you drink out of bottles, whatever you're drinking, beer, water, whatever it is, bottles is just one of those things where, one might think we've had it around for so many years, we've kind of figured out how to design a good bottle, and what more can we add there? But obviously for you guys, you realized actually there is more that can be done to make it Ergonomic, would that be a word I could use here?
That's one of the parts, yeah. So
Okay,
ergonomic, I suppose, a way it fits into your hand, kind of your backpack, and fits into your life essentially. So
right.
the ergonomics are the certain lines in the form of it that makes it nice to carry. The ergonomics of the strap, for example, which we call the carry strap, which is a nice soft silicone, but it means you can grab it from any angle and it bends, so you can just really grab it on the go or kind of like carry it around really nicely, and it won't dig
Ooh.
into your hands like a plastic. Or like a metal handle or something. The cap is kind of the main thing. You semi-twist the top half of it, which means you can drink straight from the cap. However, it kind of not limits, but it has a restricted flow to a point because
Sure.
what it does, it means that you're not gulping water, because all that means that it goes straight through your body. So it
Oh, so you've purposefully made the flow slower.
yeah, and also so it doesn't spill. So
Okay,
it's a sipping cap, not a gulping cap. If you want to gulp, you just take the top off completely.
I
So
see.
it is like a more of a, I don't want to say sipping experience, because that sounds like it's like, over
Whiskey.
branded. Yeah,
30-year-old, 30-year-old, Scotch from Speyside.
special reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's more. We call it a sip cap because it is for sipping, which means that you're not just gulping water and it goes straight through it. So it allows your body to absorb more water. But we've tested it so many times during the R&D phase to make sure there's enough water to come through. So we're happy with kind of like
Gosh.
the premium level of liquid flow of it. So it's quite a big engineering
Yeah,
process.
I feel like the R&D process alone would have definitely rehydrated you. Just sipping
Yeah,
so much water.
yeah. If anything's come out of it, that R&D process of rehydrating myself was a good
Yeah.
positive. But yeah, it took a while. It took around 2 years, 18 months to two
Oh
years of
wow.
development, design and product development, just to get elements right, even color matching certain parts, because we feel that even like the color matching elements really like heightens the premium like ness of it and kind of the design principles of it. So getting that right and getting things spot on was really important for us. All the minor details.
Yeah, you do mention somewhere that it's a statement. I think that's what you mentioned in your Guardian interview, right?
Yeah, so there is a
It's
Guardian
just
interview where
yeah.
this was a couple of years ago, where water bottles were coming a statement piece, which we do
Mm,
completely get. It is an accessory that we want people to carry them as an accessory, because it means that they are using less single use plastic. So for that, it does have to become a slight statement and you know differentiated, and something that people want to carry, whether it's the form of it, the kind of the design principles, the way it fits into your lifestyle, but it's something that's aspirational and people want to carry around with them and show people that they're using and be part of that brand, really.
that's very cool. So you're really, excuse me, you're very much, motivated by design. Clearly, you love design and you love to design great products, right?
100%. I'm a bit of a design geek. I didn't study it at university.
Oh,
It was one of the biggest mistakes I made. I wanted to study architecture. Well, I say biggest mistake. I mean, it hasn't turned out too bad, but
I mean, I think most people end up doing something completely different to what they studied.
that's
But
it.
that's a conversation for another time.
But it is
Yeah.
true. But yeah, I did kind of a safe degree. However, yeah, design is super important. I have a certain design philosophies and like the way that I look at things, in terms of, especially this day and age where you need to stop people scrolling on Instagram, and I think the visuals of the product are super important. So the form, then it's the purpose behind the brand, which makes them stick and gives your brand and your product a soul and a purpose, and then it's the function.
Hmm.
I think in those that way, and the form also goes in terms of the branding and everything as well. So it helps you cut through, helps you get that distinct kind of aesthetic, which then again helps you try and stop thumb scrolling on,
Hmm.
whether it's an Instagram ad, whether it's TikTok or something like that. So it's quite funny because talking about that, we've set up a new full service D2C studio called Envelope, which
Uh-huh.
uses all of our principles from Stay 60 and all the. I've got 14 years agency background
Wow.
in strategy, so it leads to that really nicely. So we work with purpose-led founders and departments to create like the brands of tomorrow, essentially
Brilliant.
through a whole like all. We underpin it with a digital first strategy across everything. So brand, it's the e-commerce design and build, it's the industrial design, it's the whole manufacturing piece, and then there's the growth elements as well. So it's everything in kind of off the shelf. Well, sorry, a turnkey solution for D2C brands.
Yeah, you've got the figures down, right? It looks like you've been doing a lot of research into what the right statements are. Off the shelf, turnkey, all that jazz.
Exactly.
If you're dealing with founders and startups, do you find you need to have that lingo though quite often, or do you find you can just kind of explain what it is and they get it in a way?
To a point,
Yeah,
I'm also wary of too many buzzwords coming
yeah,
from an agency where you can literally play buzzword bingo in
yeah,
meetings.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
it's
especially with corporates.
yeah. I'll be honest. I think because I'm an entrepreneur and a founder, I think it's we haven't got everything right. We've had bad manufacturing situations where
Mm,
we were quality controlling every single bottle ourselves after
wow.
Christmas and Boxing Day because the manufacturing was so bad. This is pre like our current network that we have. So like we know how hard it can be. So I'd like to think
Of
we speak
course,
to entrepreneurs and founders and
of
people
course.
that want to develop products in a certain way. But yeah, I was just throwing in the buzzwords for the podcast.
Just in case.
Yeah,
Yeah, just in case. No, of course, of course. I mean, it's very much the our audience here can be arranged, but very much part of the audience here that we're targeting is purpose led founders. So definitely in the right place and talking to the right people. And actually, we've interviewed quite a lot of purpose driven founders already on the podcast, working on a variation of things. From promoting circular economy to working on traffic analytics to just a whole range, both across hardware and software. And of course, for founders who are purpose driven, it's kind of in the name, really. The purpose tends to be one of the main things that are at the forefront of their minds, and it definitely is for us as well, where I work at QFinds. And we wouldn't necessarily. Maybe this is just us. I think we understand the importance of design, and we know how important. I mean, we know how much of a difference it make when you have a beautiful product to the user. Um, but what fascinated me is the way that you ordered things when you mentioned that it's design first, and then I can't remember the second one, but then it's purpose and then it's function, right?
yeah. It's
How?
form, purpose, function is how I kind
Okay,
of look at things from a design point of view. But
yeah,
I suppose it's more than that if you factor in purpose. Just because if you there are very few new ideas. Let's be honest.
hmm
Most people have the same idea. Bad example is
maybe a slight different variation at most, but yeah,
100%. So
yeah.
it's all about the execution. So the form of it and the aesthetic really kind of it goes across all touch points. The industrial design, the visual identity, the brand. So that covers everything from the brand guidelines. That's how you initially, I would think. I think most consumers are very visual, especially with the platforms that people are consuming. So hence you have to hook them in very quickly within the space of 2 or 3 seconds. So that's where
Mm.
your visual identity comes into play across all your touch points. Then, like I said, you need a soul and a part so to make them stick and read and understand you and be a good business. So that's where the purpose, the soul behind the brand comes into play. And then I think it's the function. I really do, because I feel like there are very simple products and brands out there, but they just look great and they've got the overall aesthetic right. And they've simplified it. They've gone that way instead of if you've got an over-engineered product or over-engineered brand story or something, then if your visuals don't look right, you really won't connect to anyone. I don't think. So that's why I think that the visual identity and the form is kind of is paramount in this day and age in a digital first kind of environment, economy, and trying to attract digital natives as an audience. I think that's kind of your first win, I think, and then it's the purpose behind that as well.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting way to look at it. I was attending a YC talk yesterday about how it's very important, especially this is especially true for software founders rather than hardware founders, because definitely hardware founders have a whole different set of problems to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, where, it's like, look, trying to find a hair on fire problem and building the quickest, most rudimentary solution that can fix that, and then selling that first.
Yeah.
So sort of like, in true MVP fashion, like, don't worry about design, don't worry about anything else. And the example they gave was quite funny. It was like if somebody's hair was on fire, you could like the ideal thing they would look for would probably be a bucket of water or a glass of water or something like that, so they can pour it over their head. But if you had nothing but a brick, you could probably still sell them that. Because there's nothing else around, and they would probably still use the brick to try and put the fire out if the hair is genuinely on fire, right? And so it's really interesting because, like, from an operational point of view, a functional point of view, let's say, founders are always told to be fast, be efficient, just get out there and put something out there. It doesn't matter how it looks, doesn't matter how it works, and so on. Especially so for software founders, for people that don't require a piece of hardware. But it is a very important point as well to what you mentioned, which is around, like, if you're selling into a digital first market, if you're selling to Gen Zs and younger, for example, is it the case that maybe they're used to a certain level of aesthetic especially when it comes to kind of like D2C, direct consumer products?
I
Has
would
that been
agree.
your experience?
Yeah, and also a lot of the branding is very similar for D2C. There's a real kind of D2C wave of brands that look very similar, that talk the same language. And yeah, even from food and beverage, from like canned drinks and stuff, they're all there's a lot that are similar. So it's quite difficult to get that cut through and create something that's different, whether it's a nootropic brand or like an energy drink or anything. It is quite, it's saturated. It really is. So you need to be distinct. That's why the visual identity is really important. It's the first thing that people will see. And it's not just about having a nice visual identity, it's having a distinct visual identity, whether it's the form of a product or the brand identity of like a nootropic drink or something like that. So it's making sure you stand out from the crowd, essentially, and don't create a Me Too brand, which we're really, really keen on. And I think that's part of kind of like, as part of Envelope, that's part of our market analysis and part of the strategy we do for branding and stuff. But I completely agree when it comes to tech. I think it's about understanding your value proposition quickly. Is there a value proposition? And getting your product market fit as quickly as you can before, I suppose, getting your seed investment. So it's kind of, you need some sort of proof point to be able to unlock the next stage of investment. Otherwise, investors are going to say, well, it's a nice idea, but does it work? Like, we can't, it's too risky.
Yeah, I mean, especially in today's environment, it's definitely gotten much tougher for startups to raise now compared to previously. With sentiment and everything else, it's it might have been easier at some point, and certainly in certain parts of the world, like in the US, they tend to have a bit of an easier time compared to the UK generally, where founders can often be backed on ideas, and then investors will chuck in a load of money for them to help them find product market fit because they're investing into the founder or the team. In the UK, we're a little bit more cynical and like to see a little bit more evidence before dumping money in. Generally speaking, of course, there will always be like the sort of outliers, but more so today compared to I mean with a potential recession and so on. I mean, a beginning of a recession is what it very much is looking like at the moment, right?
Yeah.
And despite there being money available for funding with VCs, for example, people are generally just being a lot more wary of where to put the money right now and trying to make sure they're backing, startups that have a real chance of succeeding. And so with that comes the need to prove the value proposition quite early on, even more so than before.
Yeah, I agree. I think also if you're a proven founder and you've exited businesses or, and also if you've got a network, that always helps. I feel like.
Absolutely. Everything.
I've spoken about that before within like, VC investment and things. And if you're, within a certain network, it helps. Like that's
100% word of mouth.
Yeah. And also like, it's something I've spoken about in terms of like the type of people that you see that will get the VC investment, which is great. I mean, it's great, but I think there needs to be more of a blend, 100%. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's a bigger conversation.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, we are. Yeah, it's. I mean, we're social animals, right? And humans can be quite tribal in many ways, like the way our brain works. And I think it's a really interesting thing that I have discussions about with friends in some detail, to try and understand, like where does bias come from?
Yeah,
Where does the affinity to the closest thing to us come from? Why is it that if something happens in London, let's say, it affects us so much more than if something happens in Paris or in Belgium?
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so it's quite interesting. There definitely is something there, and it's about trying to unlock what that is, and then see if there's something that can be done about it, right?
Yeah, I mean there are diverse
Yeah.
funds coming out now, which is
Oh yeah. Yeah.
unbelievable to see, and it's great. And like
It's incredible.
I want to see those growing and growing and growing because that's like,
Definitely.
incredible, and that should have happened years ago. But at least it's happening now, so that's a good thing. I think actually going back to kind of like the difference between the UK and the US, I think it definitely is like there's part of it that's the culture thing, where the US are probably more like optimistic and I
Mm.
think in the UK like naturally we're a bit more pessimistic. Um, so that I kind of get that, and also I suppose their economy's doing.
Yes.
Looking at the dollar at the moment, it's doing quite well. So that's another thing compared to I suppose the sentiment in this country.
Well, I think it's both. I mean, I try to keep it I try to keep up to date as much as possible with kind of what's happening in both parts of the world, just because obviously I'm also in the startup scene. So it's important to understand, like, how are VCs viewing the world and thinking right now in both parts. And I think it's across both sides of the pond, so to speak, that there's more of a just a bit more wariness in terms of where to put money right
Yeah,
now. So yeah, so we're talking about the investors' sentiment right now and how it's kind of across both sides of the pond, really, that you have a little bit of kind of awareness on where to put money in startups. It's quite interesting. But kind of going back to the point about diversity, it is definitely pretty good to see that there's more and more funds now in the UK, and it's also really good to see that there is more and more effort being made to try and let people that are from less fortunate backgrounds to get into the VC game.
yeah,
I don't know if you've spotted that out there.
yeah. I have, and I agree. I think it's people. When I say people from certain backgrounds, it is it's not necessarily color of skin or gender.
No, no,
It is people
yeah,
from those lesser fortunate backgrounds that haven't had certain opportunities. Unfortunately, um, that will mean a lot of those people are from ethnic minorities. That unfortunately that's just how it is, and that's like how it plays out. But it can be anyone from any background. Like I think just giving opportunity to it's just giving those opportunity, even if it's like jobs. But I think even more so, it's funding, which is great because then it's a case of
yeah,
build for that that person who hasn't been as fortunate. It's backing them, it's giving them the belief, and also it's helping them build their own ecosystem because then most likely they are going to be the type of people that will help people like them who are less fortunate in kind
absolutely.
of like the schooling that they've had or the way they've grown up and like what family background they've come from. So then I think it kind of breeds that positivity throughout the whole of kind of their own ecosystem, which is the best way of doing it. And I said, and actually giving jobs, but actually giving a job is one thing. Giving someone a potential, a serious amount of funding to create something of their own is a completely different ballgame.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's because they're going to excuse me, they're going to hire a lot of people. Hopefully one day if they succeed, and then that will make a big impact. But it's also about like the role model thing. Um, it's really interesting. Back when I was at Cardiff University, I ran for the one of the sabbatical officer roles in the Students' Union.
Yeah,
And for those who don't know how this works, just very briefly, every university in the UK, at least almost all of them, will have what's called a students' union, which helps with student matters to make sure the university is, delivering what they promise they will, but also help with other student matters and also help organize events for students and societies and clubs and things like that. And the bigger the SU, the more of an influence they have in the university generally. And some universities have really, really good students' unions. And I think I was really fortunate that Cardiff was one of those, where the students' union was genuinely really involved within internally with the university to make sure that, programs are as good as they can be, and the student voice is heard, and so on and so forth. So there's just a quick big background on how they work. But I did run in the election to be one of the sabbatical officers there, and I remember that prior to me, there was only ever. So there were 7 sabbatical officers in total. I think it used to be 6, and then they became 7, like a few years before I joined the uni. There was only ever one person from an ethnic minority background that had been an officer, and that was whilst I was at university. Then I ran. Then there was another. Then the year after he was there, there was again just back to the usual. Then I ran the year after that and won, and then I was the only one. And then the year after me, I think there were like 2 or 3, and then the year after that there were more. And it was really interesting to see that when you have representation, when you have role models, so to speak. Not that I think of myself as a role model at all, but just even just having my face there, as someone who's from an ethnic minority background who got into that position, it just motivates and encourages more people from those backgrounds to do the same thing, right?
100%. It just
And
shows what's
yeah,
possible, really, doesn't it? In terms of, like, if they can do it, then it's setting that path to allow someone else to do it, and it makes them feel more comfortable. They don't want to be the first person to step in those, in that
yeah,
path. So if they've seen it done before, then it's like, great, I can do it. I can get support, and it's the type of place that I want to be at, and it just makes people more comfortable and more. What's the word? More, I suppose, more confident in their own ability, really.
yeah, absolutely. And I think in often it's actually subconscious. Often I don't think it's even, for some people it may be the case that they actively think about it that way, but for others it might just even be that subconsciously they see this and they think, oh, cool, or that person,
Mm.
and you have a chat with them, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's like you think, okay, that's pretty cool. Maybe I'll do that one day too.
Yeah, it's that comfort and familiarity, isn't it? Really,
Yeah,
it's that
yeah,
for sure. And like, if you're in an environment where no one's like you, like it's going to be awkward, or a situation. Whereas if you know that there are people who are like you that have crossed that path or that can help you, yeah, it's a completely different situation.
yeah, absolutely. So, would you consider yourself a second-time founder now?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, with Envelope, I would say that I am a second-time founder. And like I said, we literally launched that last week. So
Wow,
it's
congratulations! That's
thanks.
very new, amazing.
I feel like the official launch for when you launch something is when you post it on LinkedIn. So for
Yeah,
everyone, that happened last week.
absolutely.
That's the official launch party on LinkedIn last week. So yeah, it's good.
Well, congrats. I didn't get the invite though. I'm a little bit upset about that. I have to
I'm
say.
really sorry. I'll send you the video footage.
I love it.
Um, but yeah, I'd say I am, and it's learning across the way. 100%. It's hard being a first time founder. You just don't know what you're doing. So you can speak to as many people, but you learn from mistakes. You learn from what's gone wrong, and there were stages where things can fall apart. And there were stages with Stay 60 where I thought it was game over, I'll be honest, in terms of
Mm,
the first manufacturer that we worked with. And the
wow,
fact that we were running through 2,500-3,000 bottles ourselves, quality controlling them. I mean, literally the worst day of my
that
life.
is nuts.
Yeah, luckily.
Did you take Jeff Bezos' advice and buy knee pads or tables?
Oh no. Thankfully, I didn't drink much on Christmas Day, so it
There you go.
was fresh as a daisy. And it was
Yeah.
just, yeah, it was tough. But then you go through that, and it does make you stronger, and it's just a learning curve. So yeah, and actually we've learned so much through the whole process, which is why we feel like we're really well positioned with the agency background and the network that we have to really help other people do things better, accelerate that innovation, and actually create really, really future-facing, like purpose-led brands and products. Yeah, with everything that we've learned and the experience that we've got, and the way that we do things,
Awesome.
we actually, we charge a lot less because of our agile agency model. So it
Mm,
allows, certain levels of startups to actually test things and get things off the ground a bit, test their MVP potentially a lot easier than it would, instead of some agencies charging a fortune for certain things, but you still get to work with the best talent. So we feel like the proposition is solid, and the feedback and what the interest we're getting so far is really good. So yeah, touch wood, it's gone well so far.
That's very, very good to hear, man. Amazing. Wow. It must must be a very exciting time for you right now. And you've chosen to work with purpose-led startups you were mentioning, right? Purpose-driven founders.
Yeah,
Is there
100%.
yeah. Is there any reason why that is, or why you chose to focus on that market? Is it something because you believe in it, or is it also kind of there's a gap in the market there that you saw? Bit of
No,
both.
I don't think it's as much of a gap anymore, if I'm honest,
Hmm.
because I think as a brand, you have to be purpose-led or have some kind of sustainability like angle, or something that allows you to connect. And essentially, we want to work with good people doing good, and kind of the heart's in the right place. And everything we've done with Say 60 is creating that purpose-led business model essentially. So everything we've learned from that, we feel like we can really put into other people's brands, whether it's the authentic tone of voice, the brand positioning, to ensure that you're not greenwashing. There's just so many greenwashing companies out there, smaller
Oh
brands, who
yes.
think that we can get this product from here, slap our badge on it, and say that we're doing good, when it's actually just an off-the-shelf product. So no, that's not how things work, and that's not how you build a big brand. So we want to create big brands for other people. So yeah, I think you have to be purpose-led. And then and part of what we were doing with Stay 60, well, a lot of it is the circular material innovation, the experience that we've got in that, and we want to pioneer that for the industrial design side of things. So it's working with making sure that a product is made from 60% recycled materials, for example. And because of that, we know that the carbon emission reduction during manufacturing is X, because of the work that we've done and the people that we work with. So we can, it's just something that we believe in, and I don't think we would be able to launch a studio and agency project without focusing on that, because that's where our experience is as well.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, there is quite an interesting thing you mentioned there, which is that a lot of people will sort of greenwash.
Yeah,
I suppose, yeah. I mean, trying to figure out whether to actually greenwash it or washing or not uh, must be quite a fun exercise for you.
yeah. I feel like this is why I think you don't lead with purpose,
Mm,
because actually you need a good product. You need everything else to be good, and then your purpose comes in. Because if you think, like I said, you get a product off the shelf and you slap your badge on it and you say that you're saving the world and you're cleaning water for people or something like that, which happens all the time, like especially in our
mm.
market, that's greenwashing. You're just creating a Me Too product that's exactly the same. Nobody needs the same product. They can get thousands of the same product from other brands. Like, you're not helping the planet. So that's why, like, focus on your brand, the strategy behind your product. So actually, like, again, are you going into such a busy space where you're not creating differentiation? So what's the value that you're giving a consumer? There's no value in your product, because it's exactly the same. Make a better product and a better brand, and then it's a case of bring the purpose in as part of that as well.
Yeah, I think the same really applies for startups, though. Like other startups, I mean, like tech startups, or not necessarily D2C, even B2B. This is a very similar thing as well. Um, yeah, I think it really is about trying to solve a genuine problem or help in a genuine way, rather than just simply copying what is out there.
Yeah,
Um, although with software, there is some advice that goes around from respectable VCs that it's okay if 80% of your product is more or less the same as somebody else's, but there's got to be at least 20% that's unique, right? That's
yeah,
yours, that is different, that does something better, faster, more cost effective, whatever.
I agree. Yeah, even not more so in terms of percentage, but like we were saying before, there's very few completely unique ideas, and also I suppose
Hmm.
they're probably VCs are probably quite happy in a way that it's similar to some products, because then they can see that there's product market fit already. Because
Yeah.
if 80% of that is similar to a product that's doing really, really well, then it's like, cool, we know there's a market for it. There's the product market fit. How do you make it better? That's where the 20% comes in. So I get that. They feel a bit more safe and secure then you brand it in a different way. Like your messaging's different, and then the extra 20% of something unique. That I suppose is the 80% is the safety part of the pyramid, the bottom
In a way, yeah.
bedrock, and then the 20% at the top is kind of your peak in terms of your maybe even defensibility. Something that's completely unique gives them a safety net to say, actually, yeah, we know this does work, so let's go for it. That happens. I mean, if you think of like who is it? Not CarWow. It's all the car company, or all the car marketplaces that have sprung up,
Sure.
everywhere. They all look pretty much the same because the market has been proven, I suppose, to a point. So everyone's just jumping into it, and also with D2C fintech providers that provide financing for D2C brands. It's like, actually, yeah, you can make a hell of a lot of money because these companies are making like a Wayflyer or something like that. I think they've invested around $2 billion into D2C startups.
Okay,
but they're essentially loans. So then they get an extra percentage back. But then the amount of companies that are doing the same thing with a slight twist on their vertical, they're literally springing up everywhere because the product market fits there.
The business model is kind of proven in a way.
Yeah.
It's really interesting as well that, eventually, I suppose, like that business model, if it's so repeatable and so easily repeatable, then it can become it just becomes a traditional business model after a while. And so it's no longer kind of like a startup in a way. It kind of just becomes, for some industries, of course, not for all of them. I'm also fascinated though about the other approach to this, which is that, so there's one approach, which is of course the whole 80-20 thing. And then there's another approach, which is, for example, like Airbnb's approach, where you just kind of rethink the problem and then you forget about the 80%, and then you just choose like 10% or 20% of the problem, but do that really well and then do nothing else. So as a route of entry to market, which is another approach that can be quite interesting and maybe can be more disruptive in some cases. So to kind of like illustrate a little bit more, so instead of building hotels and instead of building extra hotels in places where there are conferences and people, and all hotels are booked up, Airbnb just thought, well, let's just add more spaces from the pre-existing houses by renting out a living room and an air mattress.
Which makes sense, and that's how you become that's a real disruptor.
Exactly, yeah.
To the point that, I mean, people were like, "This is never going to work," and that's where
precisely.
And this is where you need
maxed out credit cards.
And this is where you need to really, really believe in the idea, or find someone else who's mad enough as you are to really believe in the idea, which they didn't to start with. But then, it obviously got the traction, and they were right, and they proved it right.
Absolutely.
But that is being like a fundamental, like, first
which
market disruptor.
Doesn't happen that often, let's be honest. In terms of like the success rate of people who enter the market for the first time, it doesn't happen that often, and to get a real disruptor like that. So it's kind of I guess about also picking where you are as a startup and kind of which approach you want to go for.
It's
There's always more than one way.
It's the riskiest route completely, because if it's not proven and you've got to max it in and nobody believes in it, and you're maxing out your credit cards, I mean, that needs a hell of a lot of belief, like single-minded, tunnel-visioned belief, but really believe in an idea, which I suppose the best entrepreneurs do. Sometimes, unfortunately, like, you have to shut out some of the negative noise, which is what they've done, just to focus on it because they believed it so much. I mean, probably 90% of the times, not listening to people and being that tunneled in your vision is a bad thing, because you need to understand feedback and feedback loops and everything.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. It's another dichotomy. It's another one of those dichotomies where, how much should you just single-mindedly believe in your vision and go for it, and then how much should you listen to everybody else's feedback? How do you balance when to do that and when to do this?
And then there'll always be imposter syndrome that will come knocking on your head, like, throughout the process. So there's belief, such strong belief that you might err on the side of being arrogant because you're not listening to anyone, which most people think you will be then. And then there are parts where, like, I have imposter syndrome all the time. where it's like, actually no, and I'll question everything too much. But then it's like,
Yeah.
oh no, this is good. But then, let's be honest, as soon as you get good feedback from someone, like,
Yep.
it makes your heart sing a little bit, and you kind of
Yeah.
it lifts you a lot. So that's great. I mean, good feedback.
And someone who's a paying customer. just
Exactly.
to add that caveat there,
Yeah.
getting great feedback from a friend or a family member who loves you, it's great. Thank you, and really appreciate it. But it doesn't actually necessarily mean that you have a good business model there.
It
But getting great feedback from a paying customer, that's a different story.
completely.
Yeah.
Good feedback from family doesn't pay the bills,
No.
and it never will as much as you would like it to. However, you're right. Yeah, paying customers, and also the data. The data always, you can't argue with the data. If the data's going the right way and you're getting the subscribers that you want, that's the best feedback. And
Absolutely.
the numbers don't lie, essentially.
I want to touch a little bit on some of the stuff you're doing at Envelope, and obviously some of the stuff you're doing at Stay 60. In terms of trying to make a positive impact out there, so of course you are like you mentioned, you're doing this partly because of the rehydration thing. You're also massively into design. You're a design geek, like you said, and another part of it is that you're doing this because it's better for the world. You want to not use as much single-use things and so on. Is there anything that you guys used while you were growing as a startup to try and calculate or measure how much of a positive change or positive impact you're making?
Yeah, so you can do things like life cycle analysis and or life cycle assessment to understand the the life cycle of your product. Therefore, how much plastic waste you're taking, single use plastic, based on the average consumption of a single, an average consumption of uh, a person of a year of how many single use bottles, for example. And it's not just that you take them out; it's the carbon. So single use products are so bad because obviously the carbon and the manufacturing emissions that are accrued during that manufacture has to keep happening every time you use that product. With a reusable product, you
Mm,
manufacture it once. Although the manufacturing in the footprint of that manufacturing is bigger, it's still so much lower than someone drinking 200, I don't know, say 150 single-use bottles in a year. Then you keep multiplying that by the lifespan of your product, which is ours is around 10 years. So then you can work out the kind of carbon emissions that you saved based on the amount of single-use plastic that you saved, also going into the ocean. So it's a double. It's the manufacturing element of the kind of repeat single-use plastic manufacturing, and also the single-use plastic bottles that you're avoiding potentially going into the ocean. And also we work with Climate Partner, so we offset all of our carbon, and we work with them and Plastic Bank to help ocean cleanup practices as well. So we kind of have all of those stats. We know exactly what our footprint is in terms of what we do in terms of doing good. So we kind of have that model in place where it's easy for us to understand the impact. And that
mm,
model we want to replicate for other brands as well. That's
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 great.
part of it. It has to be tangible. You have to show people what you're actually doing instead of just talking about it. And then it's adding other partnerships. You can work with other partners to help other things. It depends on the product. Other
Yeah,
charity
and what you
partners.
believe in as well, of course.
Yeah, exactly. There needs to be synergy with the product that you're building and the brand that you're building. But you're right. There needs to be something that you believe in to make sure that you're doing good and partnering with that charity. Then it's the tangible elements of it. A big part of what we're doing is kind of the sustainable circular material solutions. So as part of that, if you use a recycled ocean bound plastic, for example, the manufacturing footprint of that compared to virgin materials is so much less. So that's what
Mm,
we want to focus on. Or recycled stainless steel, or using non-plastic materials that have very similar properties to plastic. So eliminating plastic completely. So that's what we really focus on. That's what we want to essentially be the pioneers on. And then, as part of that, we make it quite clear. We can do all the calculations, and then you can kind of like, as a brand, highlight this as a tangible kind of benefit of what you're doing, and you're not adding more plastic back into virgin plastic into the kind of pipeline. You're actually reusing. That's one part if you're using ocean bound plastic. But like I said, there are other recycled materials that we work with and that we want to kind of push more and highlight people should be using this. It's not just reusing products, it's reusing the materials so they don't end up in landfill or in our oceans
so
as
it's
well.
really Taking it all the way back to the initial part of the production line
A
rather
hundred
than just
percent.
thinking about, yeah.
Yeah, so like a completely closed loop in that way, to make it as sustainable a product as possible, but making sure that it is still a very good quality product that will last as long as possible as well. So it's getting that balance right, because
Mm.
if the lifespan's bigger, you don't have to continuously purchase that product, which again, that's a
Oh,
problem
yeah, absolutely.
in terms of the manufacturing output and the usage output.
Yeah, absolutely. And how difficult or hard was it? Sorry, how difficult or easy was it for you to actually calculate those things early on as a startup? Because like as a founder, there's so many things to focus on. Um, sorry, yeah, as a founder, there are so many things to focus on that you can do, and sometimes it can be quite hard to make the time to actually calculate the impact you're making or really think deeply about those things. Like how easy or difficult was it for you guys when you were starting out with with Stay 60?
For us, it was a big part of what we're doing. So it was definitely something that was a priority for us. Like I said, to make it tangible, and then we can then communicate it. But also for our point of view, it's like what impact are we actually making? But then we worked with a consultant that we work with at the moment now for Envelope as well to calculate that for us. So there's a hell of a lot of data and science behind it. You need to use multiple platforms to be able to validate the data that
Yeah.
you're using, and then you can source it properly so people know that you are actually using the right platforms. And also with your manufacturer, like you need to make sure that your manufacturer is completely open and transparent in terms of everything they do, because you'll need to have those conversations and understand their processes to be able to get those calculations. So that's where us having a really great network and open and transparent network of manufacturers really helps us achieve that same objective for other brands with Envelope as well. But yeah, for us and Stay 60, it was definitely something that was really important to us and something that we wanted to highlight from the get go, really, as quickly as we could.
So it didn't matter if it was difficult for you; you're gonna do it anyway because it's such a fundamental part of the business, right?
100%, and it was
Yeah.
difficult. However, I like to build frameworks essentially and learn in
Hmm.
like quickly. So from what we've done and how difficult it was, we now have a framework that we can then build for
Great.
other companies. So that's kind of
That's
just
really
how I
great.
work with, because like I said, coming from an agency background and from a strategic background and also kind of project management, like I like building those frameworks and say, okay, this is good. Actually, we can make this easier by doing this, and actually we can streamline it if we need to do it in future. So we've done the hard work, which makes it a lot easier for the brands in future that we work with. So, but it should be a key part of what they're doing. So we would always recommend, actually, you need to calculate, you need to be tangible. Also, the calculation highlights why you should be using circular materials, for example, why the lifespan of your product needs to be as high as possible, and why you need to make sure that it's manufactured to the highest standards and why it should last better. So then it shows that those founders why they should be going down a certain route as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And what's your plan then with Stay 60 moving forward? So you obviously just launched Envelope. That's going to be taking up time as well. Something you're going to carry on. Something you want to probably get off the ground properly and do a lot of work with and work with incredible clients and help other founders expand your impact. You sort of can really start compounding the impact you're making if you're helping so many businesses that are purpose led, which must feel pretty freaking brilliant, really. But what's the plan with Stay 60 as well? Are you going to continue doing that on the side?
Yeah, it's still running and going quite nicely actually. We are developing some new products and making sure our current line is as sustainable as possible with certain kind of upgrades that we're doing in terms of the materials and everything. So and it's also the B2B side of things. So we're working with some really great brands to the co-branding elements, and then we highlight the impact that we're making. And then there's a really nice bit that we're building out in terms of the B2B side.
Okay, well,
And then, yeah, Envelope's the other thing, which will be keeping me busy already. So
of course.
I like to be busy. I'm that guy that freaks out if I'm not busy. So it's good. It keeps my brain ticking over. And yeah, look, I'm just kind of looking forward to where things go in the next 12 months or so. But I know that things are busy, but I've always thought that busy is good. And if you're quiet, then things aren't going right.
That's great. Wow. Um, And so with Envelope, I suppose then, I mean, founders listening to this, if they're working on a purpose-driven business, which I'd imagine most people listen to this, most founders listen to this would be. Um, if they want to get in touch with you, what is the best way? So first of all, there's Stay 60, and you mentioned there's a B2B angle to it. So do you want to maybe tell us a bit more about the B2B aspect of it and which kind of companies that you look at co-branding or partnerships or things like that with?
Yeah, so for the co-branding element, we more of a partnership element. So we also work with another partner. So every bottle that you buy off us, we also clean up 1,000 single-use plastic bottles from the ocean. So then you've got really tangible impact as a brand and as a business. So if they want to get in touch, there's wholesale@stay60.com. So just wholesale@staySixty.com. And then, our team will get back to you and figure out kind of numbers and pricing and everything. And then we have like a partnerships deck that we'll send out to people, and they get a real proper idea of kind of how we can work and the impact that we can do together as a partnership. On Envelope, the URL is envelope.agency. So quite simple, quite straightforward. And my email is Kirpal, so it's KIRPAL @envelope.agency. So it's just awesome. Envelope and .agency. It's quite simple. Or go on the website and send an entry onto the form, and it will go straight to us. But if it's easier to come direct, I'm more than happy to speak to anyone. We can help, really.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thanks so much. I mean, there you have it, everyone. So so if you want to get some design work done to help you market the D2C brand that you have that is purpose-led, then that's the way forward. I think we'll be in touch with you through QFinds at Stay 60 to see whether some bottles for staff is a good idea moving forward. It's good. I think that'd be quite nice if we can help clean up a few thousand bottles from the ocean. I think that'd be quite nice.
Sounds good. So, look forward to partnering.
Absolutely. Kirpal, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, man. Thanks so much for making the time today. And one thing that we like to do is invite people back on at some point in the future as we grow, as you grow. Listeners would like to hear about your story as you continue to evolve and get better and so on. So, we'd be happy to have you back on at some point in the future as well. And thanks so much for the time today.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for inviting me on. And look forward to chatting again in future.
Absolutely. Cheers. Have a beautiful day, my friend.
Cheers, Mo. Cheers.
We hope that you liked the episode. This podcast was sponsored by QFinds, a hiring platform that matches candidates with jobs and employers based on many factors that ensure longer-term alignment. It goes way beyond package and salaries and takes into account much, much more than that to ensure a happy working environment for everybody. To find out more about this podcast and to see further releases, we'll be announcing them at the @qfinds.io Instagram page, as well as on the qfinds.io website, as well as from my own personal Instagram page and my own personal LinkedIn. All information you need that we spoke about in the podcast or this information mentioned here will be mentioned below in the description. So take a look, visit those links, and if you like anything or want to get in touch, please do. And lastly, stay tuned for more. Have an amazing week ahead of you.